the United Aircraft TurboTrain, a late 1960s futuristic vision of America's high-speed passenger railroads. Racked with equipment failures, image failures, and financial failures, find out why the TurboTrain was the $20 million scam with the dirty green carpet. Hi, this is Jeffrey, and I'm sure most or all of you have seen or heard of the United Aircraft TurboTrain. Now, the TurboTrain was supposed to have been a glimpse into the future of American high-speed passenger railroading. Now, the TurboTrain came at a very interesting time in transportation history in the U.S. when the U.S. government was embarking upon a number of very futuristic initiatives such as Transbus, which was the bus of the future, or the SOAC luxury subway car program, and there were a number of others, but those are just two examples. Now, there are other videos out there about the TurboTrain that speak about its technology, the tilting mechanism, how it worked, how it was designed, and all of that. But in this video, we're not going to talk about those features. We're going to talk about how the TurboTrain ended up being very possibly one of the biggest scams in American passenger railroading, at least in the 1960s and 1970s. So we're going to review an article from the early 1970s that describe all of the problems and the mismanagement that occurred with the TurboTrain program in the US. So let's get started in reviewing that article about the TurboTrain and all of its issues that it had back in the 1970s. And here's the article, The TurboTrain, A Study in Incongruities, by Christopher Lydon, special to the New York Times, dated January 31st, 1971. Washington, January 30th. At the start of a new 2-year experiment, the TurboTrain between Boston and New York can be seen as either the last best hope of rail passenger service or a sign that good trains cannot happen here anymore. Just possibly, it is both. The record of the TurboTrain's first 2 years is a mass of incongruous impressions. It is a 170-mile-an-hour train straining most of the way under a 75-mile-an-hour track limit. It matches airline decor with railroad grime. It rides on jet engine power, yet the engineer wears a steam engine smock that seems to capture the backward-looking spirit of an aging staff, understandably conditioned to indifference by recurring bankruptcies and the steady decay of services on their New Haven line. Though the TurboTrain runs constantly full in and out of Grand Central Terminal, the one round trip a day as provided in the Department of Transportation's continuing demonstration program will not substantially affect the overall decline of passenger traffic in the corridor. The train's operating economics are still mysterious. Passengers are pleased. No one is really pleased with the TurboTrain except its passengers, who wish nonetheless that Penn Central could manage to answer its phones and make the ride seem like fun. Unless they have ridden also on TurboTrain's Canadian cousin, the longer, faster, cleaner Turbo that streaks 4 times daily between Montreal and Toronto, passengers in New England are only dimly aware of how much better the local experiment might have been and of the revolution that may still be riding with it. The United Aircraft Corporation acknowledges that its first generation of TurboTrains developed multiples of problems, not hundreds, not thousands, as was reported. United Aircraft hopes to make its first real train sales when the embryonic National Rail Passenger Corporation, also known as Amtrak, goes shopping for innovative equipment. Bugs or no bugs, the TurboTrain is the only new train on the market. It was born of the same 1965 High-Speed Ground Transportation Act that produced the New York to Washington Metroliner. It was noted at the start that the TurboTrain, far more than the Metroliner, was the kind of experiment, if not the very vehicle, on which the future of passenger trains would likely depend. but it has nonetheless been the orphan of the Northeast Corridor project. The Metroliner was assigned the role of demonstrating public demand for intercity rail service, but its all-electric machinery made it adaptable only to electrified routes, a minute fraction of national mileage. It also has a weight problem that will still be harder to solve. Weight can mean a smooth ride, but it also requires a vast investment in good track. The TurboTrain, by contrast, can carry Metroliner capacity with less than half the train weight, and through a distinctive suspension system that banks the aluminum cars around curves, it maintains a virtually constant speed on the winding, relatively unimproved New Haven tracks, as well as on the straight but unwelded rails in Canada. 6 trips a day. The Metroliner, now running 6 round trips a day, is a $75 million program, a joint venture of railroad and government in which the railroad, originally the Pennsylvania, trying at the time to convince the government of the benefits of merger with the New York Central, saw an opportunity for some highly visible public service and committed the lion's share of the investment. The TurboTrain, on the other hand, is perhaps a $20 million program, a joint venture between the government and United Aircraft. Penn Central fell heir to the project when it was forced to absorb the bankrupt New York, New Haven, and Hartford Railroad, and it has played the operator's role without enthusiasm. The Metroliner was conceived as a test of the entire travel experience, and more than $5 million was put into station improvements and nearly $50 million into the roadbed. Station platforms were raised so as to eliminate the need for steps on and off the train, for example, and 3,000 of the Pennsylvania's clerks and trainmen were sent to charm school. The TurboTrain, on the contrary, was to be an equipment test, running back and forth, according to the original plan, between Boston and Providence, Rhode Island. United Aircraft used that foot in the door to make it a Boston to New York run, where the TurboTrain could show its stuff on Connecticut's swerving shoreline, but it could not persuade the government to lease more trains or to upgrade the surrounding services. The fruit of these economies has been a spiral of embarrassment and neglect for which each of the TurboTrain participants admits a portion of responsibility. United Aircraft was shaken at the start by a series of mechanical failures, spent more than it had planned on modifications, and then ran out of money for more routine kinds of interior maintenance. Government officials in the Federal Railroad Administration recognized that the program was underfunded and could not yield conclusive information about the 2 3-car trains or the public's response. Carpet is filthy. Finally, Penn Central, which never professed any commitment to the program, has insisted that the TurboTrain observe its diesel speed limits, stretching the Boston to New York travel time to 3 hours 49 minutes, scarcely an improvement over the best conventional equipment and a half-hour slower than the TurboTrain's test runs. Differences in the Canadian and American TurboTrain services cover a host of details and suggest, in the aggregate, an abysmal gap of enthusiasm and outlook, almost of culture. In Montreal and Toronto, where each downtown railroad station forms the underground core of a surging business district, passengers walk onto the Canadian Turbo from raised carpeted platforms. The carpet is a disarming touch, and it also serves to keep the Turbo's interior carpets immaculate. In Boston, on the other hand, the TurboTrain's passengers walk out from the cavernous gloom of the South Station onto the old outdoor platform, grimy and slippery after winter snow, and track fresh mud onto the train's already filthy green carpet. And that's the end of the article. So there you have it. The $20 million train that did 1 round trip a day from New York to Boston on the Northeast Corridor. Now, it did not even do the second part of the route, which was from New York to Washington, D.C., so it only ran half of the line. Now, as mentioned previously, the TurboTrain was looked at as the future of passenger rail in America, but when the Penn Central took possession of it, it had little to no enthusiasm for the project. When it got transferred to Amtrak after the Penn Central went bankrupt, the energy crisis began, and bunker C fuel, which is what the TurboTrain used for power, became very, very expensive. And then it became economically unfeasible to continue to use it. The Union Pacific Railroad had turbine engines on their freight trains that also used bunker C fuel, and they too had taken those out of service. Now, the Metroliner, which was also mentioned in this article, fared a little bit better. They had 6 round trips a day, and it cost $75 million. But the Metroliner had also morphed into the Amfleet cars, which are still in service. So the design of the Metroliner actually lasted a very long time, whereas there's basically nothing left of the TurboTrain. Nothing else was based upon it. Now, there were 2 further TurboTrains in the U.S. There was the French Turboliner that was tried, and they did not buy any. Amtrak did not buy those trains. And then there was the ROHR, the ROHR Turboliner, and that was, it was moderately successful for a time. It was mothballed, then it was rebuilt and brought back into service, and now it's no longer in service. But we've had 3 different turbo trains in the U.S., and unfortunately, the first one, which was really the most ambitious, just didn't make it, because it was a very unique looking train. It was something that was designed to compete with the airlines, but it just didn't make it. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed this look at the mismanagement of the original turbo train. And as always, thank you so much for watching, and have a great day. Bye.